Do you know the term sex glue?
No.
It's a scientific phenomenon. It's the way God hardwired us. When you orgasm, there'll be a gluing of whatever you're looking at. If all you have had sex with is the person that you're saying, I do for the rest of your life with, then that's the person that you're going to be glued to forever and ever. But if you've taken, yourself to all these other places with multiple partners, multiple images, then you're gluing yourself to all those different things and experiences and people. And so a prayer I pray often is, Lord, would you quench my curiosity and restore my innocence?
That's good.
I don't want to be curious about this or that anymore. I want to be curious about my wife.
Sweating like TD Jakes. I'm sweating. Yeah, hot. Thing's freaking.
That brother preaches, man.
That brother does.
He preaches. He
got
preaches.
a rag in his back pocket.
Got the rag. We're in Cleveland, and so Jimmy Rollins, doing revival night. No joke, he carries a microfiber towel, and it's no bigger than like a 5x5 little wash rag or something. And I promise you, that thing could absorb a 2 liter. You drop a 2 liter, that thing's gonna. More absorbent. Thank you. And so he
brought the bounty for you.
But he does it.
The bounty picker upper. The wipes.
He does. Yeah, I needed this. Thank you, Bounty. Appreciate that. If you want to sponsor the podcast, you can as well. Kansas City Chiefs. Going back to the Super Bowl.
That's right. Back to back,
a couple
baby.
weeks before Super Bowl. And who's the other team they're playing?
I don't know. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't. We're not going to mention them.
The team that they beat 2 years ago in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're going to do it again.
Do it again.
I'm excited for it.
That's right.
Well,
I do like Jalen Hurts though. I gotta throw that out there. I like him, man. He's just he's a great guy. Loves Jesus, plays the game right. And honestly, man, as a Chiefs fan, I know I'm not supposed to say this.
Don't say it.
I hope he gets a Super Bowl, but not this year.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't want to win anymore because he's the Eagles. And being in the NFC East and me being, I bleed blue, Dallas Cowboys. Next year's the year, though, guys. Next year's the year.
You are the typical Dallas Cowboy fan. Every year is the next year for y'all.
But it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen this next year. We know it is.
How do you feel about their coach?
The great Schottenheimer.
Oh gosh,
the great.
What has he done?
He's assistant coach, like everything. Special teams, defense, PE, whatever it is, he's done. And I can't wait for him to step up now to a head coaching job and take us to a Super Bowl.
Hey, everyone's got to develop.
Right?
Everyone needs an opportunity to develop.
I'm just saying.
Okay, so maybe this is his opportunity to develop. But underneath Jerry Jones, it ain't happening. That's why I'm not a Cowboys fan. I'm just being honest. I love Texas. I know I should be, and living in Dallas, I know I should be a Cowboys. I can't do it, man.
Stephen A. Smith, if you're listening, you're gonna come to the Super Bowl and root on the Cowboys in 2026. So.
Stephen A. is a realist. That's why I respect
like Stephen
him.
A.
I do.
There's a lot of people that don't like him. I love his energy. The only thing I don't like, that I cringe a little bit, is the whole when he opens up first take and he's like, "Holla at your boy," and I'm like, "Oh, come on, do we have to do this every morning?"
JP does it every time.
He does.
Friday Q&A.
He does. His Q&As though. Let's talk about his Q&A.
Man. Let's talk about his Q&As. They're legit.
I did not. I've known of him. Of course. Everyone knows who JP is. I know you have good friends with him, right? You're same circle.
Solid
guy. Well, I came on to him to knowing kind of like his Friday Q&As because my wife Keisha actually goes through them and reads every one of them, and then she likes to send me the ones that apply to me. Oh, she does. The ones that apply to me though are the ones that are sent to my Instagram. So she sends it to
little
me.
jab.
Yeah,
right?
I'm a husband and I don't know how to do dishes, and then he puts, here's how you serve your wife and how you wash your dishes, and she sends me that one, and that's the one I'm, like, oh, okay, I guess this is for me. And so, no, that's not it. She doesn't do that, but she does. She sent me some stuff, and so, but one of them that really jumped out at me was JP. Someone asked about accountability. Like, what does your accountability look like? And I think it's a big question. I think the question probably stems more from because in ministry right now, there's so many people falling.
Yeah.
Right. And I won't name names, but if you do enough Google searches right now and you look just like pastor, moral failure.
In Dallas.
Yeah, just
here,
in
Dallas.
Yeah, just in our zip codes. I think that a lot of people are asking questions, right? They're looking at church leaders and they're saying like, it's wrong because you put them on a pedestal, and you're not expecting perfection from them, but you're expecting more. To be of above approach, to be a leader in this area. And they're failing. And I think the question kind of stemmed around that time. The question was like, what's your accountability? And I started asking myself, because JP's response was, he said something like, I have a group of men that I go to. And it wasn't just a group of guys they go to and said like, hey, how can I pray for you? But it was a group that they came and confessed.
That's right.
And so do you know about this? What does it look like?
Every Friday morning, 6 a.m. I mean, I have a group of men, four of us, 5 of us, including me, but 4 of the men that ask me the hard questions. Where have I been in thought, word, and action that I need to confess? And really that's rooted in not, hey, I want to catch you doing something. It's rooted in what James 5:16 says. Confess your sin one to another, pray for one another so that you may be healed. The prayer of a righteous man is powerful and effective. And so, this idea that just confessing your sin vertically to God, that is so biblical. 1 John 1:9, if you confess your sins, he's faithful and just to forgive you of your sin and cleanse you from all unrighteousness. But there's a difference between being forgiven by God and healed by God. Healed by God comes when you live in the light, when you confess your sin one to another. And notice how it doesn't say just confess it to anybody. It says the prayer of a righteous man or a prayer of a righteous woman is powerful and effective. And so, for me, it's 4 men that I go to, and they just said, how have you been feeding your flesh this week? And I'm able to share and live in the light so that the power of sin can be weakened. I believe the power of sin is always in secrecy. But when you bring your sin to the light, it loses that power, that sting. And now you have a group of men that you trust and that are for you and aren't there to condemn you or shame you into behavior modification, but they're there to come alongside and say, hey, how can we win the battle today? Let's just win the next 24 hours. What boundaries do you need to put in place? What truth are you not believing in? What lie can you identify and bring the truth from God's word to combat that lie? I mean, even the men that I'm discipling, I say, hey, we're gonna memorize scripture based on the ditches that you find yourself in from time to time, the sin areas that are calling your name. And so find verses that you can call your fighter verses, so that in that moment that you want to go to that sin, the Spirit of God can quicken your mind and your heart to meditate on his word. And so good. I've hidden God's word in my heart that I might not sin against you, Psalm 119. And so that's the purpose of accountability. And it's a beautiful thing. Accountability is not a dirty word. It's a means of protection. It's a means of freedom. Everybody wants the freedom to do what they want to do until they don't have the freedom to stop doing what they can't stop doing,
Yes, I think that part where you said and I think most people would think accountability is like being found guilty of something, which is true. Like I'm guilty of it. This is something, but there's past it moves past that.
Yeah.
Right? There's all right. Yes, you're guilty of that, but now bring it to the cross, give it to God, and then allow others to speak life into you give you that wisdom. And I think the part where I think about it, and I'm 45 now. There was a time though where I used to. And this is new for me. So accountability is something that over the last probably 6 months that I've introduced. Since I read that post and his Instagram little story, I've introduced that in my life. And my walk, it feels like I'm growing closer to God. Not that I wasn't, but it just feels like somehow I'm getting even closer. And I think that's you're never finished, right?
Yeah.
Until this side of heaven, this side of earth, it ends and you end up one day in heaven. I think it's always progression, right? Yeah. You're getting closer to him.
Yeah.
But what I really believe happened in my walk was the accountability was this kind of like letting go that I have to be this kind of like this perfect husband, this perfect dad, this perfect friend, this perfect servant leader, this perfect employee, that I can actually lean into others, release the burden, have others pour back into me. And I think that's been for me, the exciting part of it is just being able to know that I have freedom in it. And I know for having my wife, Keisha, who is on the other side of this, and anytime I say, hey, I'm going to get with I have one right now. I would love to grow that, but I have one guy that I felt like he was on my heart.
Yeah.
If I say, hey, I'm going to get with him, his name's Mike. Hey, I'm going to get with Mike. She's like, go. Like, she's just real quick to say it because she knows how important it is to my walk. I think what I learned through it, though, was the different kind of like opponents that you face throughout your life, they change. It's almost like a boxing match. And I'm a big boxing fan. I grew up watching, I remember my first fights watching like Sugar Ray Leonard, Mike Tyson.
Come on.
Way back when. So I'm dating myself. And then you kind of get into your Oscar De La Hoya days, you get into your, now you have, of course,
Mike
like
Tyson.
No. Mike Tyson's still fighting.
The GOAT, baby.
He is the GOAT. But each opponent you face brings something different, right? So you have to prepare for your opponent. And I think the same thing happens in your season of life is when I was younger, my opponent was just kind of like seeking like pleasure. So like, and ways I did that was when I was a young adult, like married, the first 10 years was like playing video games, right? Like that was I cringe now when I think about it, but I had my little Turtle Beach headset I would have it on. I'd be like, lock in, boys. You jump into Call of Duty. And, if any Call of Duty, Modern Warfare junkies out there, I was that kid or that young man. I wasn't even a kid. I was a young man. I had kids. I had people who were looking up to me and trying to provide for.
Yeah, you're a boy who could shave. That's what you were.
So bad. It was so bad. But what I found myself into in that season was I was staying up all night until like, 3, 4 a.m. playing games, had a high KDR, guys, just to let you guys know. Like it was good. Like it was really good. If you don't know what that is, Google it. But I was doing really well in that, but I would then wake up early the next morning and I had no energy for the kids. So I found myself grumpy, grouchy, to my kids who were needing me the most. And that was the part where I felt like in that season, my opponent was video games, which is nuts. Like, I never thought this something like, cause my self-defense against that was like, I'm not drinking. I'm not looking at porn. No affairs. I'm not doing the bad stuff.
Yeah.
I'm just playing video games, but it was out of moderation. And it started like, really kind of like, impacting who I was, the fruit that I was bearing every day.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where that was that opponent. And I think now my opponent is more kind of me. Like, I really think that I just, I really just want to be the best version of myself sometimes. And I forget that God is the one who's going to infuse that. And I think I can will it across the finish line myself. And that's where the accountability comes in. So there are those times where I'm like, well, I just pushed too hard. I depleted myself. I have nothing left to give. And then my buddy's like, well, did you talk to God about it? And it's just a simple question. And I'm like, oh man, like I didn't talk to God about it. I didn't take it to prayer. And so that's a big part. So accountability is big. I like that.
It's huge.
We were talking a little bit earlier about kind of like pornography is, some people will say like, well, I don't look at porn. I'm not going to Pornhub. I'm not doing this or that. But you're looking at Instagram reels.
Oh yeah.
Right. Or you're looking at something you shouldn't be looking at. You're watching a show you shouldn't be watching, and especially because it's tempting you, and you're not watching it just for the storyline. And so there's this kind of like perversion of television, perversion of media, social media, and people are getting latched to it, and it's becoming their master. And so just kind of wanted to talk to you, kind of like, what do you think kind of like right now when I think of kind of like pornography, all of these things that are being like, how do you defend yourself against it? What's the best way every day to just wake up and defend yourself against that?
There's so much here. I'll put this out there. I was a porn addict for a decade of my life. To answer your question bluntly, Romans 13:14 says, make no provisions for the flesh to gratify its desires. So in other words, don't allow temptation an opportunity to intersect. And so for me, because of my past, I needed to remove the temptation and the opportunity. And so we talked about boundaries a little bit the last episode. I had to put those boundaries in place, and I needed the men around me to help me put those boundaries in place so that I wouldn't go there and I wouldn't allow the temptation and opportunity to intersect. You got to starve your flesh. And the more you starve your flesh, the more your appetite for other things grows. And so I had to starve it so that my appetite for righteousness and holiness and the things of God would grow. And so I think that's step number one. I mean, but man, if your heart never changes, then you can put all the boundaries up you want. But the heart wants what the heart wants, and the heart won't stop until it gets it, right? So the only person that can change the human heart is Christ. And so what are you doing on a daily basis to not just allow temptation and opportunity to intersect, but what are you doing on a daily basis to stir your affection for Christ? I mean, Jesus said in Matthew 22, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. This is the greatest commandment. And then the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. So the question that we need to be asking is, how can I love God with all my heart, with all my soul, with all my strength? There's a lot of freedom in following Jesus. A great theologian once said, love God with your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and then do whatever you want.
That's good.
It's this idea that what do I need to put in place on a daily basis so that my love for him can grow? And so I have people that I'm discipling make lists, like a list of
that's good. Practical step.
Yeah. Okay. First step, and make a list of things that stir your affections for Christ. And listen, they're not all spiritual, but there is no substitute for the spiritual disciplines, or some people would call them habits of grace. And I think because the provisions, the disciplines are means of God's grace. So having a Bible to read that will renew my mind daily, that's a provision of God's grace in my life. And so that's one of the things that stirs my affections for Christ. There's no substitute for prayer, reading God's word, fasting even, serving in the church, being in community, these disciplines that we see. But I do other things as well that stir my affections for Christ. If I get up early and get a good night's sleep and, man, I get a workout in, and that helps me love God more.
Yes.
Right? I mean, just not having to rush out the door, getting a good sweat in, I connect it back to God as a means of worship. Man, you've given me a body that functions, and I don't know how long I'm going to have this body that is going to be able to work out like this, but I want to use it for your glory. And there's something beautiful about releasing the toxins in your body as you're sweating it out. And God uses that to stir my affections for him.
I want to jump back to something you said earlier, kind of how you started. You were addicted to porn for 10 years. Yeah. I think there's a lot of people listening that will be like, I'm in it. And a lot of people have different ways that, of course, they were introduced to it, right? Kind of like, what was your journey in that? How were you introduced to it? What did that, because you're talking about new patterns. Like right now, when I said like, hey, what would you say to someone? Hey, here are some patterns, here are some disciplines to do it. What were the patterns what were you doing then?
Yeah, let me just share my journey with it. I mean, I was in ninth grade, and we had just moved into being a blended family. My dad got remarried after my parents divorced 2 years later. And I walk into the garage, and my stepbrother went off to college, and he leaves a stash of his stuff in the garage. And in that stash is a magazine. I know those aren't as popular anymore. You can just access the web, but there was a magazine, a porno, and I began flipping through the pages one by one. And then I put that underneath my shirt. I walked upstairs, and I slid that right underneath my mattress. And that started a journey with pornography that led to a decade of addiction. And nobody knew about it. Nobody knew about it. And that was the start of my freshman year of high school. And it just got more grotesque. I mean, you now are offered the web. The internet I'm dating myself here, but it was be a big deal. And I got my first computer going off to college, and remember in my apartment, just assessing pornography on demand anytime I wanted it. And so that was my journey with it for a long time. I mean, it was a battle. And so, when I got to the end of myself in college, and just began to see that it was leading me to emptiness and unfulfillment. And, and I was dating a girl at the time, pastor's daughter, actually.
PKs.
Man, I'm telling you. And she was a follower, man. She just compromised for me. I believe that. And so I led her down a dark path.
Does that weight feel like
oh man,
like you still carry that? Like you feel it? Like,
well, I've given it to the Lord.
Yeah.
And I've asked for forgiveness, but I lived a lie, man. I was an imposter for so long. And I knew the church answer, so I could kind of fake my way. I thought I could fake it till I make it, but that's the worst thing you can do as a Christian, because God sees everything. And you might be able to fool other people, but you can't fool him. But then when God got a hold of me in college, he never calls you to something without calling you from something. And so he was calling me to himself, but he was also calling me to, or calling me from a life of a porn addiction and, a life of hanging out in these playgrounds with these playmates. And God just began to slowly bring me to the people that could help me and journey with me and hold me accountable. But it's not like I committed my life to Christ that year and flipped a switch and everything was, fine. And I was free from pornography. I was forgiven by God.
Yes.
But I wasn't truly healed, like I was talking about earlier. That came through months and months and months of walking out James 5:16, living in the light. I said the power of sin is in secrecy. I also would say the secret to life is to live a life without secrets. And so, I finally realized what true biblical accountability is when, and it started, like you said, I got one guy. That's where it started for me. One guy that I felt like I could truly be 100% of my true self with. He knew me, but I didn't doubt he loved me. And I say this all the time, but you'll never be fully loved until you're fully known, because you're just loving people are just loving some false version of who you are. If you don't feel fully known by anybody, man, that's a dark place. That's a lonely place. And so I just went for it as I started to get to know this guy that was discipling me. And I just started sharing, hey, I fell again. I fell again. And then the boundaries got stricter and stricter. And, I just started learning more about who God was, and my love for him and a relationship with him started to grow. And God began to change my heart. It wasn't just what I was doing with my behavior. It wasn't just the boundaries I was putting in place, but he began to change me from the inside out. And through that, man, victory came.
Yes. And
it's been a journey. It's been a battle for sure, but one worth fighting.
Whenever when we talk about magazines, and like I remember one of my things that I struggled with was growing up in the late 90s, early 2000s, when we were 19, 20, 21, was I wasn't looking at porn. And to just be real, I was poor. I didn't have a computer. There was no access because we just didn't have access. But what I did have access to was going to be old school Maxim magazines, things like that.
Yeah.
And I wasn't looking for the articles.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I heard there was words, but but I remember the day that, I remember getting rid of all the magazines. I remember the day that there was a moment where I was like, it was a new boundary. I felt the conviction. I knew what needed to happen. I was already married at the time. I was already married to Keisha. And so, she didn't come in judging me or anything, but I felt that conviction. And that was one of my big ones, where I was like, okay, I don't need to do that. Now, of course, we have a computer. Don't worry, guys. So we have one now. But that, it is a struggle. It's one of those temptations, I remember hearing at a message one time, acknowledging beauty is not the challenge or the problem, right? If you look once, the first look is, I acknowledge the beauty. The second look, you're getting into danger, right? Because you're not going back really to acknowledge the beauty. You're going back for pleasure. The third one is really where you get in trouble, because now you're probably imagining something. And so I try to put on that. I try to always think that became kind of my, acknowledge the beauty. That's it. Because I know the second look is just going to lead to a third look. Yeah. And the third look is never going to be good. I'm not saying you always win at that, but that's something that you aim for. But that's good stuff. I think for one thing that I would ask now is, now let's think about people today. So if you're young, or if you're a parent with a youngster, but it's accessible on your phone, it's accessible on anything you're on as far as digital goes. But what do you think like about like OnlyFans? Because I know that right now that OnlyFans is just like, if you look at the stats, it's 2016. I want to say it's like it's over like $3 billion worth of, revenue coming in every year on OnlyFans. The average age of an OnlyFans person, profile, whatever you want to call them, the people that are doing these content channels, call it content. I want to say is between the ages of 18 to 23.
Wow.
Like, what do you think is going to be the effect? How should we, I guess, prepare for that? Because that's a different, if you want to say, enemy approach.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think a lot of what I've already said applies to. I mean, we're just finding new ways of, sinning, creative ways of sinning. It's the end of Romans 1. They find new ways to sin, and not only do they find new ways to sin, but they give hearty approval to others to do the same thing they're doing, because we all want to feel good about ourselves. So if I know that there's Christians out there that are approving OnlyFans, then I feel not as bad. But I had to finally say, enough is enough. Like I would compare my life to everyone else, even people in the church. When you do that, you can always find someone worse than you, which gives you security in the fact that you're not that bad. And I just said, my standard is no longer the people around me. My standard is Christ. And his benchmark is unattainable. That's the point, right? His benchmark is holiness. This word means to be set apart, to be perfect. Far from that. But as I chase after the one who is perfect, which is Christ, he begins to change the new desires in me. So, I think it's the same play. Philippians 3 says, put no confidence in the flesh. Man, I would put so much confidence in my flesh. And thinking that I could stand, thinking that I could even have social media. I mean, even the people that I was following at the time, man, I had to unfollow some people. And it made some people mad, but I just had to have some hard conversations. But that's what we do as men. We're like, okay, I'm not here to win the approval of others. I'm here to win the approval of Christ, Galatians 1:10. So at the end of the day, I had to make hard decisions. And that led to hard conversations, but it led to freedom for me.
Yeah, I want to talk about a hard decision quick. So So I think that you talked about like people you're following, because it's not just, like maybe you're not going to Pornhub, maybe you're not on OnlyFans.com, but you're on Instagram and you're looking at something that you shouldn't be looking at, Reels, or maybe there's someone that you're following that's a friend from high school, or maybe it's a friend from church. I know that we're kind of joking around earlier. Like there are people I've had to go unfollow that are in our sphere of relationships, because they're posting stuff from the gym, and they're always the angles that are most, like, whoa, what did I just see? And it always starts off a little bit like, I'm at the gym, I'm working out, check out, it's always something encouraging. But then all of a sudden, somewhere along the way, it breaks bad. Somewhere along the way, it starts going like, oh, you're doing this because you like the feeling this is giving you.
Yeah.
Now, the other side of it is, you might like the feeling it's giving you whenever you're looking at it. And I know that we've had people where I've had to tell Keisha, like, I'm just gonna stop following them. At this point, I have to stop following them because I don't want to wake up every day with my phone with your butt on my face. I don't know how to say it, but that's what it was.
True.
It was, and so that's the part where I really feel like for men, like if you're listening to this, and I'm talking to men, the people you don't need to follow.
That's right.
It, because it's the profile that you're like, I hope that this isn't going to be seen. I'm not going to, my wife's going to find out. No, they should know who you're following. They should be able to, if you're scrolling through, or they want to see what you're looking at, let them see it.
Yeah.
But I know that that's an important part of it, is if there's someone, and even if it's someone from church, guys, even if it's someone from church, make the unfollow.
Yeah, I agree. It goes back to the principle I said earlier. Remove temptation and opportunity. Don't allow those two to intersect. And that's part of the battle. That's not the full battle strategy. The other side of that, again, we have to do something that's going to not just modify our behavior, but something that's going to change our heart. And so we have to get back to what stirs your affections for Christ. And I have a list of those things, and I try to do 3 or 4 of those a day. And they're the disciplines of the faith of reading God's word, praying, being with community. But I'm also going out and enjoying nature, working out, drinking black coffee. I love good black coffee. I'm doing the things that God reminds me of his goodness while I'm doing them.
Yeah.
And being with my kids, going on long family walks. That's for the married man, right? That with a family. But you got to find those things that aren't necessarily spiritual, but God reminds you of his goodness as you're doing it. Those things can cause you to love him more. And that's the goal at the end of the day, that we would love the Lord our God with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength, and then do whatever you want.
So I had a friend text me about, and I hope I get the word right, and it's duality. So kind of like, all right, living 2 dual lives, kind of like, all right, like I know everything you're saying, Josiah, like everything you're saying, I agree, and I'm trying, but then I have this other side of me, all right, that my mind just races there sometimes. And so there's this tug of war, right? There's tug of war between the two. And I know that, having the accountability, to dive into the word, all those things, those are good. But to that person who's fighting duality, like, what is something that you would say to them to encourage them that that it isn't that they're living 2 like different lives, to make them feel normal? Because that's what I'm trying to encourage people. I was like, it's fun. You're not called to be perfect. But what would you say to that person that feels like they're living that dual life?
I think we're all living a dual life in some way.
Yeah.
It's the flesh and the spirit at war with each other, right? It's Galatians 5. Whichever one you feed will win. You got the spirit of God and the flesh, and they're constantly at war with each other. And not to mention, you have an enemy that's prowling around like a roaring lion, trying to hook you with your flesh. And then you got the world as well. So you got these 3 enemies that you're fighting every day, but then you got the spirit of God. If you're a follower of Jesus, you've trusted in him, his life, death, burial, and resurrection for the forgiveness of sins, and not just life after death, but life now. He's given you his advocate, the Spirit. He who is in you is greater than he who is in the world. So feed him.
Yes.
Feed the Spirit. And as you feed the Spirit with the things that grow your love for the Lord and starve your flesh, your spirit will win. But if you keep feeding your flesh with the things of the flesh is going to overcome the Spirit every time. And so we all are living in duality, if you will. But we all have a decision to make. Which one will we feed?
One of the things we talked about was your addiction. We talked about kind of how you went into your adulthood with it. I think for me, and I would invite my wife to be part of this. She's on this, watching this. She's over here on the side. But for me, it wasn't porn. For me, it was at 12 years old, I lost my virginity, and I just started chasing girls since. I didn't, and I guess it was always about the chase and the conquer. I don't know if that's the right. I hate to. That's an ugly word to use, but that's what it was. It was like this kind of like it validated me, it affirmed me at their expense, which led to me having a child at 17 in high school. We said yes to life. He's fantastic. We have a great family. It is, but it was not planned. It was out of God's design. And all I did was just carry this. What I learned the word was, I didn't learn the word until I was nearly 30, objectification, like objectifying women. But not in the sense of pornography. Like that wasn't mine. It was more in the sense of trying to sleep with girls, sleep with, just to the point where I met my wife, and like it continued even through my early years of marriage. And so
just to clarify, that was sleeping with me, not other women.
Yeah, not other women. Yeah. But thank you.
Appreciate
that was good. That was
clarify.
Want to
clarity's kindness.
But that was something that what's crazy. So here's the crazy part. I decided to do it in God's design, marriage, but I was still sinning within marriage, but not even within porn, within our marriage. And I didn't even realize it. And I think there's a lot of guys out there that, especially if you're in the church space, that do this, right? That's kind of like you carry this this addiction. You carry this addiction because that's what it is. My addiction started from more or less an abuse to an addiction to an objectification, which then became my wife's burden to handle. And until the day she couldn't handle it anymore. And then you end up on a couch with the counselor talking about, oh, did you know you objectify your wife? And I was like, oh, what? Can we talk about that again? I don't even know what that word means.
Yeah.
I think it just gets tricky for women because we are encouraged, don't deny your husband, submit to your husband when you're in this kind of relationship. And people already take that out of context. And then when you're dealing with something like an addiction, it gets very tricky. So I think that's where it's so important to have not only a biblical counselor, but a biblical counselor that specializes in sex. It is a thing, it's real, and it changed everything for us.
It's good. Have you discipled any men in that kind of like scenario?
Oh, yeah.
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 Okay, I was about myself.
You're not by yourself. No, you're.
Okay,
You're,
I thought it was only me. I felt like I was only talking to me in this room.
Not at all. Not at all. There's a generation
Yeah.
of men that are resonating right now with what you're saying.
It's a heavy one to carry because I think for a lot of men, I think it's something they just kind of carry kind of like a secret. And I love what you said earlier. Like, how'd you say like,
The power of sin is in secrecy.
yeah, I have built up very good blinders, like on like social media or like I don't like, I do my best. Like I really work hard, but then I turn my lust and my temptation to my wife 24/7. And that's so, and I'm just going to like, instead of like looking at on your phone or something and you're like, okay, that's good. No, I'm trying to look at my wife that way. Not in a way that I love her and I care for her and I want to provide for her in all those ways, but I'm looking at her as a means to my end.
Yeah.
And so that was a hard one because for her, she always felt like she had to be ready to kind of like be ready for me. Perform. Yeah, perform. I mean, and the hard spot for me was because she was trying to be what did you call it? Submissive wife, was then it put her in a position to perform. And I didn't realize the damage I was doing while it was occurring, right? So I go through the day, I haven't looked at anything, I get home, I see her, she looks good. I just want to like, all I want to think about now is just, let's get it on, right? And whatever the end goal is just that. The end goal is not, how was your day? How can I pray for you? Is there anything that you're struggling with? There was none of that connection part of it. It was just.
The end goal wasn't oneness.
No.
Emotional oneness, spiritual oneness. It was all physical oneness.
It was only about physical.
Yeah.
And I think she carried that as far as she could. And we reached a point where she couldn't carry it anymore.
Do you think there's a right way of going up to your wife and saying, babe, I want you to be the only source of my affection?
I think we've tried to learn how to do that. Yes. I think she's realized that as well. Like it was never that she never wanted to meet. She just wanted it to not be transactional.
Right.
I
think that was the key to it. She didn't want it to be.
I didn't want money left on the table side next to our bed afterwards.
Yeah.
Basically.
So I believe there's a right way, because I go to Kathy and I just said, hey, babe, I want you to be the only, really, you are. Like from God's word, you're the only source of my affection. But there's a right way for me to view you, and there's a wrong way for me to view you. And for me, a decade of pornography, I mean, I had fantasy after fantasy in my mind. And they were not realistic. And so, I mean, I relate heavily to what you're saying as far as objectifying my wife to please myself based on my unhealthy, sinful fantasies that were cultivated through pornography.
Yeah, Pastor Jimmy Rollins, if you don't know him, guys, go check him out. He talks about how images, like when you watch pornography, or even if you were with previous people, and you had experiences with people, and you want to carry that experience into the next relationship, they're like those are the things you have to be prayerful against, like actively, prayerfully against, because they get kind of, I don't know his exact words, but he more or less says it's like they get like etched into your brain and they're hard to forget, right? So, And especially they're hard to forget whenever you do make an advance to your wife and she says no. And now you're left there by yourself or you're in your thoughts. And you're like, I got this thought in my head and in secret, I can go here.
Yeah.
And so he talks a lot about how you have to put up some walls on that. Like you have to pray that God makes that new, that he heals that. For me personally, whenever I remember going to the counselor, I remember sitting with the counselor just recently even. And what's crazy is I went through some stuff about a year and a half ago that were kind of like, it brought up a lot of emotions. So you have all these emotions come up. And the way she explained it was when you've experienced trauma and then you kind of go through, relive the trauma, what your body does naturally is it goes back to how you coped before. How I coped with my trauma before was chasing girls in sex. That then kind of like became the solution to it all. And so here I am, 44 at the time, and I'm going through this. There's a lot of raw emotion. The emotion was though the same emotion that I went through from, let's say, 12 to 15, when I was actively more or less building this like pattern. So my body naturally goes back to survival mode. How did you cope with this before? That's where your brain goes. And what the counselor said to me, and she was fantastic walking me through it, was it's Egypt. It's the old Egypt on you still. I didn't even know I still had it. I'm 45. I've been walking with Christ. I feel good. I mean, most people will look at us and say like, you guys got a great marriage. You guys got it figured out. We don't. I mean, we don't have it figured out. Yeah. But we are blessed. We have a lot of favor. But I didn't even know that I didn't even know I was susceptible to it again. But I was. And it was 44. Yeah. And, I'm on a couch. And I'm like, oh my goodness. Like, how did I end up back to 14?
Do you know the term sex glue?
No.
Really? Huh. It's a scientific phenomenon. I mean, it's the way God hardwired us. I mean, it's this idea that we would be one, like not just emotionally, spiritually, physically, but it's this, when you orgasm, whatever you adhere to will naturally, there'll be a gluing of whatever you're looking at. So as you're orgasming, you will be stuck to that thing. I mean, there's a story of a kid that it's kind of gross. Was made fun of. Yeah, was made fun of by his family. Like, hey, I heard the bed squeaking last night. What were you doing? And he just turned beet red, and obviously he was masturbating. Yeah. And so he stopped masturbating in his room. And so they lived in the country, and he would walk out to some land and he would masturbate, but he looked down at his boots every time he would masturbate. And, he was gluing himself to his boots. And so every time he had sex with someone physically, he had to wear his boots to have sex with.
Because that's in his mind.
That's in his mind.
Wired it that way.
That's the way that God has wired. So that, think about this for a second. If all you have had sex with is the person that you're saying I do for the rest of your life with, then that's the person that you're going to be glued to forever and ever. But if you've taken, yourself to all these other places with multiple partners, multiple images, creative ways of sinning sexually, then you're gluing yourself to all those different things and experiences and people. And so a prayer I pray often is, Lord, would you quench my curiosity and restore my innocence?
No, that's good.
I don't want to be curious about this or that anymore. I want to be curious about my wife. And Lord, I want you to restore my innocence from the past. Like, Lord, would you allow me to forget images that I've looked at, videos that I've watched, people that I've been with.
Oh, that's good.
So that I can truly be one with my wife. And so I had all these fantasies going into marriage. But I prayed that prayer for years before I got married. And slowly but surely, I believe that God is helping me to forget the things that I had done in the past, the things that I looked at. But there's certain things, man, I think will stay with you for a long time or maybe forever. And it's because of that sex glue term, the way that God has rigged it. And it's a beautiful thing that and that's why, people say when you have sex, look at your wife in her eyes, because she's the only one with that face. And if you're constantly just looking at other body parts, well, there's a lot of other people out there that have body parts like that. And so I want to be one with Kathy Gaucher Jones. You know, you're making a good point. Like, we can't just be connected physically with our spouses. We got to be connected with them emotionally and spiritually.
Yeah, I think that's the lie I believe. I believe the lie that when I got married, that she was just going to be able to meet it all.
Yeah.
And I learned through this conversation and through the prayer and us talking about it was, I was wrong in this. And we want to thank you guys again for joining us today. Josiah, thank you for being here. Thank you for always just being real. There's more to come. Right? This is just the beginning of it. You know, Josiah, he's going to have his own show. We're excited to take this further, and hopefully it helps you. Hopefully you feel blessed with this. Thank you for being here.